All right, welcome everyone to our National FIC Coalition meeting. So we have quite a lineup of things to cover today, so we will get to it right away. We will, as always, start with a government update. We'll let Chris take it away, and then if anybody has any questions, concerns, comments, we can go ahead and ask Chris anything that we are wondering.
All right, thank you, Trisha. Hope everyone can hear me. Happy Friday. Just a few things I wanted to update folks on, and I've sent a couple of this to Trisha, so maybe it is circulating out there. On Tuesday of this week, so that was the 30th of June, the federal government did announce that they are extending the commercial rent subsidy program to include the rest of July. So originally it was April, May, June, and now it's been extended one more month. So I know that a number of industry groups, particularly the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, continue to push hard on this for not only an extension, they're looking for an extension at least through the end of September, but they continue to push to get the numbers up for landlords to take up the program. On the government's website, it does say, with that news release that they put out, that they have already doled out 152 million through that program, which they say equates to rent breaks for approximately 20,000 tenants across Canada to date. So there is that. Related to that, I wanted to mention that British Columbia has also extended the ban on commercial evictions to the end of July as well. So that, again, is good news. Any other questions on the rent subsidy program? Oh, sorry.
Is there any discussion about having the, I know we've been lobbying that there's a number of issues with the program, and the provincial government seem to think along the same lines of diverting funds to the tenants directly, mandating that landlords actually do it, because it's one thing to pause an eviction, but it's like, just like you're kicking the can down the road. Has there been any discussion at all, Chris, that you can speak of?
Not really, to be honest with you. Not that I'm familiar with. They, you know, I know the provinces are trying to do as much as they can, particularly here in Ontario as well, where we are, or I am. But not much new on that from what I can tell. I just saw there was a question here. I'm gonna pull it up there. Yeah, no, that's a good question, Blake. I would not be surprised if we, the CFIB is frankly one of the most powerful lobbying groups in Ottawa. So I would almost be surprised if it wasn't extended until at least September. Okay. And then just the one other thing I wanted to mention, and Trisha, you and I were going back and forth a little bit on this, was about particularly the city of Toronto and the issue of mandating face masks, as we're seeing more and more municipalities mandating face masks. In fact, I was at a store yesterday and bought a couple more for me and my kids. Toronto, as of July the 7th, are requiring face masks in any enclosed spaces that are accessed by the public, and it specifically notes the inclusion of gyms in there. So if you weren't aware of that, I definitely wanted to bring your attention to that matter.
There is a paper from URSA on why you should not wear masks in a gym. So what do you think, Chris, the best route is to get that to the, I guess, the municipalities who are making that decision? What's the best?
They've already.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there was a disclaimer that stated that you do have to wear it in gyms, but not while you are exercising.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good distinction to me.
Okay, good.
So you walk in, take it off, work out, and then put it back on as you leave?
Exactly.
Yeah, and assuming staff will be wearing it as well, since they are not participating in activities.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think at the end of the day, it's just another measure where the government and is trying to keep people safe, while at the same time trying to have that balance of getting back to our normal activities, right? So with that disclaimer, that makes more sense, as you said, Scott, with being able, or with that report saying that it's not easy, or you shouldn't exercise with a mask on. Anyways, that was it for my updates. And again, happy to either have questions funneled through Trisha or directly to me. I am available most of the time, although I will note, Trisha, I'm off next Friday, so.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Chris? Or anything that comes up, feel free to funnel them in through me. So,
Hey, Trisha,
yeah.
It's Dave Hardy here. Just one quick thing. I think we should try to work, especially, Toronto's going to be the first city in Canada where we do have these face mask rules. It's my understanding that you're meant to wear a face. So I'm thinking about going into an Orange Theory, for example. You would wear a face mask until you got on your treadmill, not when you walked inside the gym, until you got on your treadmill, and then you were sufficiently spatially distanced from the next person. And you would keep, and as long as you could maintain that spatial distancing, you kept your mask off. If, for example, you left and you were in a traditional gym and you were going, to another area of the gym, you may have to put it back on. I just think we want to be careful as an industry association. We may want to consider putting together some guidelines so that we have a little more clarity among our industry, because the first thing that'll happen is someone will there'll be some kind of an outbreak or some kind of a problem, and there will be the rules may not be clearly defined. I think it would be in our best interest to come up with something that I think everyone could agree upon.
So I understand that those instructions about the mask that you just described, Dave, those came specifically from a document that the WHO put out recently, WHO, and URSA was parroting those. But you're absolutely right. Exactly how you described it is what the article says. And I think if we reference the WHO article, it might give us even more, or paper rather, might give you more credibility than just referencing URSA directly.
Yeah, I agree. And if I got an email from SoulCycle just recently, and they said, you have to wear your mask until you get on your bike, and only once you're on your bike, you take your mask off. Once you finish your ride, you put your mask back on. So I think, just especially in the Toronto studios and clubs, pardon me, if we could have some clarity on that, and certainly, recommend everyone in the industry try to have some type of either a written document or something that they can stand behind, so that's really clear to the staff, because nothing would be worse than a whole bunch of social media hitting with people, standing side by side inside a gym without a mask on.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. We can put some guidelines together about that and some recommendations. Yeah. And I do want to note that URSA has 2 webinars next week. It's the same webinar that's offered twice, about rebound strategies and key considerations for reopening the fitness industry. So if anybody is interested in that, please do check it out. I added the link to the chat box there. And then there was a question about, does anyone push the municipal tax issue? So,
Yeah, I don't know if that was for me, Trisha, but
yeah.
I mean, that's something that we've started to talk about. I was just responding. That's something that you and me and Scott have started to talk about in the broader scope of what we might be able to do, with regard to advocacy and moving forward. So I'm just looking and reading that as well here. Rather pay the landlord. Yeah, I mean, there's not much. You have to pay your municipal taxes, right? So I'm not quite sure what you're asking there.
My understanding is municipalities can't run deficits.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really got to funnel up to the province. The province would have to fund the city in order to reduce the tax burden on the businesses.
Yeah.
So we do want to create a provincial lobbying plan, and I know, Chris, you've sent us a plan that we need to review in depth and get it in front of this group. But to me, that would make sense on how we would actually do that.
Yeah, we've been locked out. I mean, I don't see any other thing. You can't have quiet enjoyment of your property, and they still want taxes. That, to me, that's a no-brainer. People were locked out of their houses right now for over 100 days. There'd be an uproar and they wouldn't be getting their tax money. But somehow we pass it off on the landlord, who I actually have a bit of empathy for in this situation.
Yeah, so that's something we should definitely look into, and just so we have some information on track. All right, let's move on to the next item. So Terry is a consultant who speaks to a lot of fitness businesses, and he helps kind of organize supplies and connecting suppliers to fitness clubs. And Terry, would you like to share the information that you have been sharing with the Ontario Coalition?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hi, guys. So a couple of really good products. My goal for the last 3 months, I've repositioned myself to start looking at some of the best products and services to help my clients in the gym industry in general open safely and become more profitable. So I've looked at literally dozens of different products and services, and there's a couple that really stand out that I've recommended to my clients. First one is called a safe entry scanner. Now, that company developed using AI technology from Microsoft. They've created a scanner that will build more confidence in your members that your club is safe to use. So, for example, the whole purpose of the scanner is it provides a more accurate determination of whether a member is likely to have COVID. And the reason for that is fever by itself isn't the only indicator. Even a thermal scanner, which is better than the handheld guns, only scans for fever. But this unit analyzes 7 different symptoms that are associated with the virus. And let me see if I can remember all of them. Fever, congestion, cough, sweat gland activation, exhaustion, headache, redness of eyes. And they provide the results for you in 3 seconds, and you just walk under this, through this little doorway, and they can scale it to the size of the space you have in the gym. And the other thing that it does, which seems pretty impressive, is it can actually tell the difference between a medically induced fever and a fever that is just, or sorry, a higher temperature that is just there because it's hot outside or somebody rode their bike to the gym, for example. So preventing symptomatic individuals from entering the gym is obviously huge, but it eliminates false positives too, which will tick a lot of members off when their access is denied. The unit can actually be leased for 1, 2, or 3 years, and it works out to pennies per scan, depending on how many scans you do monthly. I think we did the numbers that for it to be equitable for you to use, you should do at least 250 scans a day. And maybe it might start off a little slow, but we're hoping in September that we'll be back up to, I think the average gym might have 300 to 400 workouts per day in the fall at least. What I've suggested to some of my clients who are looking into it to help them have the unit pay for itself is they can either charge their active members a few bucks extra per month. Personally, I feel a good percentage of them won't mind if it puts their mind at ease that their environment is safer. And it might even get some of the frightened members to come back if you get the word out to everybody that you've got this this machine that can determine that somebody coming into the gym is truly doesn't have a potential problem. The other option is you add a few dollars a month to your new memberships, and I'd let them know that their monthly dues includes the scanner if you do that to ensure that they're safer when using the gym. That would be a good selling feature. And you can even build it into the cost. You don't even have to say it's $5 extra for the scanner. Any questions on that particular product? What I can do is send some information out to you guys, or if you're interested, just send me an email, or I can give Trish my email info. Well, she already has it, and you can contact me through her. The other particular company that I seem to find some value in is these guys have been working on other companies as well to help them open safely. And this company provides each gym with their own all-purpose web-based customized app for most things that you're going to need in this new reality. So this app gets customized to include the gym's logo and its own personal branding as if it's essentially that gym's app. And basically it is. The idea is to send a link to all your members so they all have the app. And here's a list of some of the capabilities which you guys probably have in place, some of them already. But for those that don't, here's the quick list of features. A safety protocol video for members and guests coming into your club. So they'll provide you with a QR code that you can put on a poster at your front desk. So members and guests will have to scan it and listen to a 30 to 60 second video before they commence their tour or their workout. Now, that should really help to support your front desk staff too, who may not always be proficient in delivering safety protocols when they say the same thing over and over for weeks on end. The other thing would be a staff cleaning schedule for keeping the gym spotless and virus-free. As you guys know, there's some pretty hefty fines coming out for clubs that are not just clubs, restaurants, any business that do not keep their club or their gym or business as safe as they can. So how this works typically is you have a checkbox for the day and time each piece of equipment or specific area the gym was cleaned and an e-signature of the staff member who cleaned it. You just tell the company that designs your app how many pieces of equipment you have, and they input that many checkboxes, and they'll supply you with the stickers to label each piece of equipment. That way you don't have to label everything bench press, shoulder press, etc. It's just number 1 to 50, and you'll check. You'll have a dashboard as an manager and owner, and you'll see who's cleaning what when. And of course, that gets saved for any potential government inspections. Member workout appointment tracking.
So Terry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Maybe what would be best is if you send me all the information and then I can send it out to everybody else.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Yeah, that would be great. And I know you have a lot of information on that people can kind of go through and see what is going to
will do, Trisha.
beneficial for them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Terry.
Pleasure.
Another thing we want to bring up is HR concerns. So some clubs are worried about how to deal with the fact that they are needing to reduce the number of employees that they currently have because of their class sizes, because of capacity, and just comments around what your club, what your studio is doing in order to maintain these HR concerns. So this one's an open discussion, so if anybody wants to jump in and provide some advice on that.
I'll just speak to Alberta and what we're doing. So the government, so when we did the temporary layoffs, the period to basically maintain that relationship with the employees was 60 days. The government did extend that to 120 days, which is coming up here in a few weeks. So we've brought back some staff now that we're open, but it's, we haven't brought back all of the staff. And hopefully we can ramp it up over the next couple of weeks as we're open. We have sent, on behalf of the Industry Association, just a request to the government to see if there's a willingness to extend further to 180 days, because that would really help us, as we reopen. The real challenge is if we get past that 120-day mark, then you're basically, hopefully they agree to maintain their temporary layoff and continue to receive CERB, or you could trigger termination clause and termination pay. So, and what we've done to maintain the relationship with people is we have an employee Facebook group. Managers are reaching out all the time to do temperature checks. We still have our employee assistance program. We're inviting them into the club to work out, just to make sure that we, maintain that human relationship with them. But it would be helpful if the government, provincial government, did extend that 120 days. And we've cross-trained everybody, so everybody knows how to do everything, including clean.
Great, thanks, Scott. Anybody else want to jump in on that topic? All right, well, we can leave that, and if there's any other questions that come up about it, or any tips that anybody has to share, please feel free to send them my way. The next item on the list is about setting financial goals. So when you are going into this reopening your club, how is your studio or your club setting up financial goals for the duration of the year? What do you think would be beneficial? What do you think is a logical way to set up goals? Especially because things are not the way that they used to be.
I think for us, I know here we've been doing some forecasting, and obviously it's not good. It's kind of dismal, but we're still looking at bringing in new members, and we do have budgets and targets set up for that. Same with all the ancillary classes and PT in particular. We do anticipate PT to be a big one, so we've been setting it up, but again, we're basing it on approximately, to be conservative, based about 35 to 40% capacity, what we typically would have. So it's been a significant correction in our projections, but that's roughly what we've been working with, 30 to 40%. We're hoping to be able to raise that outlook based on the incoming membership being higher than we anticipated, and it looks that we might have to do that. Fingers crossed, but that's conservatively what we're going with.
Sorry, Mario, can I ask, because this is a question of a couple of the Quebec clubs, you're saying 30% less than last year, or 30% of last year?
No, we're being extraordinarily conservative and going 30% of what we did last year. Okay. But also I should add a caveat. We've also had some complications, have nothing to do with COVID, immediately prior to the shutdown, just some internal renovations and that sort of thing. So we've had to drastically reduce our forecast because of that. I wouldn't be quite so conservative with yours based on our situation, just because again we did have other factors playing for us as well.
If I can. Hi, everybody. Here, what we decided to do first, when COVID started, we did our financial expenses in a COVID environment, which is way less teachers and employees. Some of us, no rent. So the strategy now, to be realistic, and because the student looks, they look a little bit different now. They come back, and some studios are super full, and other studios are really quiet. So we're not sure exactly what we do now. We decided to focus on trying to have the same numbers, let's say, of benefits of performance of last year. Because if you're trying to say, let's have a higher sale to compensate the last 3 months of loss, that make no sense. But the last 3 months, you have way less expenses. So what we're trying to do is overall for the year, trying to have this with less expenses, to have kind of the same benefit if some of the studios were profitable already. So that's our target. And it take out a lot of pressure. Which is, let's say for September, we're trying to have some numbers look alike. So we put back some advertisement budget like it was last year, because let's say this month of June, we cut all our budget of advertisement. Our results are less good, but at the same time, we had no Google ad, we had no Facebook, and this has an impact. So sometimes you stop to do your advertisement and you say, well, my sales are going down, but you need to move back to your advertisement. So the strategy is overall for the year, really trying to be, as a result of each business, the same, and to come back to September with the same energy for bringing people back. And this kind of oriented your action to bring more people in your business, I think. Voilà.
Yeah, I'll just speak to, like, it's like playing pin the tail on the donkey in the dark on Jello. Like, it's a moving target all the time. You make assumptions, and then you have to see what actually happened and then revise your forecast. And then, like, we do that every week. So we've been open now for 1 week. You know, we made some assumptions, and we revise, and then we're going to look at it next week and revise again. And you know, we're really trying to be as lean as possible and open up in phases, and as members come back, we can adjust. But you know, we literally redo the budget every single week based on what's actually happening. So
Great, thank you, everyone. Any other comments or questions? And then we will go on to our provincial updates. Thanks, we're okay here. All right, let's go to BC. Let's start with BC. I believe Jeff is on to speak about BC today.
Yep, just give me 1 sec here. There we go. Hey, everybody. Yeah, not a lot of change out here. Our numbers are kind of planing. Not a lot to update. Just our major issue is just with cleaning supplies. We're just going through a ton of it right now. I know we talked about it last week on the meeting about, I don't know, maybe there's some alternatives people are looking at, but yeah, that's our biggest issue right now out here.
Thanks, Jeff. So I think the provincial updates today might go a little bit quicker, but that's okay. Let's go on to Alberta. Scott.
No real update since last week. There is a grant that the application just came through for small businesses. It's fairly small. It's $5,000. My understanding is most people will get approved for it. So we sent that out to the Alberta businesses and studios. Yeah, no real update. They're just from, you know, what's actually happening. Some more facilities have come online. Municipalities are preparing to open around mid-July. And the exciting news is Edmonton apparently is going to host the NHL playoffs in the Stanley Cup. So that's really exciting. And maybe Toronto, but I heard Edmonton for sure. Yeah, but no, from a government standpoint, no real update at this point.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Let's go to Saskatchewan.
So Skye on the line. Do you want me to go ahead, Trisha?
Yeah, please. Thanks, Skye.
Sure. Okay. So some of you may know I'm involved in both the big box and the studio market. So with Orange Theory in Saskatchewan, and then big box with Evolution Fitness. So first off, hats off and a thank you to Blake with Orange Theory Fitness. What he did is he lobbied the Saskatchewan government to apply the same rules and regulations that they did in Alberta, which was to reduce the distancing from 4 meters down to 3 meters for the studio market and group exercise. The Saskatchewan government acted very quickly. They were very thankful that Blake prepared all this work. So thank you so much, Blake. That in fact allowed us to go ahead and open or plan to open Orange Theory Fitness. So without that, we'd still be closed for the long term. Another thing happened with contact sports. So Saskatchewan government allowed contact sports to start taking place. However, in relation to health clubs, they still mandated that court sports, such as squash and racquetball, needed to be closed, and that didn't make any sense. So I simply sent them an email saying, hey guys, this kind of doesn't jive. What's going on? Within an hour, they responded saying, yeah, you're right. Go ahead, open up your courts. So to all of you guys out there, if something doesn't seem right, the government's got so much on their hands that sometimes just pointing out something very small will get them to change their minds or to just accept. But you have to put it in front of them. Showers and locker rooms were allowed to be opened starting last week, so that's been good. Sales at the big box continue to be stronger than last year at this time, but they've definitely slowed down since we've opened, which was about 3 weeks ago. The bad news is that suspensions and cancellations still far outweigh new sales. We're really hoping that starts to taper off to the sometime in August, and as somebody else was saying, we got to be ready for September. That's what I'm hanging my hat on, and kind of get a resurgence of both our businesses. That's it.
Great, thanks, Skye.
Skye, I'm just going to add one thing to your description of what happened in Saskatchewan, because I think it's really important that everybody understands. If we are lobbying in a lot of cases, you're right. These provincial regulators are very open to suggestion. Precedent is really something they're looking for. So you can refer to other provinces and utilize what's going on there. I think that's a really successful way of being able to lobby for things. But I really think it's important, and we've taken this same stance in Alberta. When we sent the emails for Saskatchewan, we also sort of finished the correspondence by requesting that these guidelines be reassessed on a regular basis, be it every 30 or 60 days. Because I think we have to sort of, as we're advocating for the industry and for the guidelines that we need to be able to operate, we also need to be able to make sure that we are, we're setting an expectation with these officials that if conditions continue to improve, we need to be able to react. And we used an article that was that article that came out from Europe last week. It was another thing that we sent through in Saskatchewan, and it cited the fact that 1 to 2 meters is kind of the sweet spot for social distancing. So and what we said is, listen, this is what's being talked about in Europe. If we think 3 meters is a good place to start right now, let's endeavor to reassess this in 30 or 60 days, and with the thought that maybe we can continue to inch away back at this, whether it's 2.5 to 2 to 1.5. I just think that for all of us that are on this call that are actively seeking conversations with these officials, we have to be setting that expectation of reassessment, and 30 to 60 days kind of seems to be what they're more than willing to be able to do, and I think they appreciate the working with groups that that are tackling it and understanding that this war is going to be won by inching away at this thing as opposed to big sweeping changes. So that's all I wanted to kind of add to that.
If I can add one thing as well, that Blake, we're always thinking about inching forward. I just want to give everyone an example of what we saw happen this week in Arizona. One of the club owners, a guy named Tom Hatton from Mountainside Fitness, came out, and if you watch any of the U.S. news or certainly Arizona's news, he was big there, and he came out and blasted the Arizona government for shutting down gyms again, because they've also shut down restaurants, and they're having 5,000 or 6,000 cases a day there. So they've got another problem. It's likely in the fall that not likely, they're certainly talking about this coming in waves. So as much as we're always looking to progress forward, I think we also have to be careful. If they do come back and push us backwards a little, it's how we handle it. So what they did in Arizona is they fought back. They positioned the gym as adversaries to the health department. A number of people got charged with misdemeanors, which have up to 6 months in jail for keeping their businesses open. And now public sentiment, and I've been watching the social media, has really turned against the gym industry there. So I think we have to be careful that while we're continuing to lobby, we also have to be just respectful and try to maintain a good relationship, so that if anything does go backwards, that we certainly follow and don't make the same mistakes that they made in Arizona.
Thanks, Dave. All right. So when it comes to Manitoba, no big updates there, except for the fact that they have also reduced to 2 meters rule. So that's a good sign. So that seems to be the average distancing throughout the country right now, which is kind of a good standard for us to be aware of. And I think that's something that most of us are comfortable with. Let's go on to Ontario.
Sure, I'll take that then. So a couple of things. First of all, Dave, that last point you made was fantastic. We do need to be a little careful. I think we've been pushing so hard the last little while to get reopened that I think it's easy to lose sight of that we can be our own worst enemy in that regard. So thank you for pointing that out. To that end, there was an article put out yesterday by I think Ursa pushed it. It was a public article that came out of Oslo. They're saying that gyms are not anymore dangerous than just about any other place. So that's a great article. Now I know it has yet to be peer reviewed, and there's a lot of questioning on the methodology. But regardless, Ursa felt good enough to put it out and push it out to everyone yesterday. So I do think it's important that we get on that and start to and push that article. It's very positive and it's very helpful to our cause. So in Ontario, the biggest challenge we come across now is just this whole thing that was already discussed by Chris regarding the masks. But it looks like there's some interesting workarounds, for lack of a better term, regarding that. But we're still waiting for more direct guidelines. It's very, very important we get some direction from the government on this. So we're still hoping for that. An interesting thing that happened in the last little while is the combat sports gyms and the combatives in Ontario. They have worked away as of phase 2, when we allowed competitive athletes to train inside facilities now. What's happening is the various organizations like Boxing Ontario, Muay Thai Ontario, BJJ Ontario, they have listed every single one of their athletes as competitive, which therefore allows them to go into clubs and train. And this is happening. Clearly, this potentially could be disastrous. So we need to, as an industry organization, need to keep an eye on that, particularly in Ontario, because again, going back to what Dave said, if something goes awry and there's an outbreak, it's going to set us all back. So we need to be careful. So to that end, there was also a situation that happened, and I know Nick was talking about this at length, wherein a gym opened a facility, I believe it was a Lakeshore gym in, I'm not sure where it was, somebody wants to chime in, I want to say Hamilton or that region, where they opened an outdoor facility. And sorry, I'm just seeing Paula saying that statement there. Yeah, that's true. They're being very mum on gyms. Anyway, the point is, and this is why, because they still don't know the regulations. It was, oh, thank you, Nick, it was Windsor. Yeah, in Windsor. So they're not able to give us clear information because people are kind of going out there on their own. And I think the government's just trying to understand how to best address this. So again, we need to practice discipline. We need to stay on top of these operators who are trying to get ahead of everyone and potentially putting us at risk. So we need to be very careful and continue to push that. We have had some movements in courts. The court sports, racket sports, we have them. We've got tennis, racquetball, and squash. Obviously, tennis courts outdoor, not a problem. We're doing that. They seem to be operating quite well. You're not supposed to have doubles, but I can tell you it is happening. We've had no issue with enforcement at this point. Racket and squash indoors, strictly speaking, is one person hitting the ball against the wall. There's no league, no interplay unless you're from the same household. In our situation, we have 6 courts. We've decided not to run it because it's going to be very challenging to enforce. So we leave that to individual operators, obviously to determine, but for us, it just didn't make sense. Even though the cleaning rules were quite surprisingly lax, they just wanted to wipe the floor down at the end of the day, which is really the only requirement they gave us beyond wiping door handles and whatnot after every use. So we just decided against it because it just wasn't as much demand for one person playing at a time. That's pretty much it, unless someone else has something to offer for Ontario. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything else right now. It's been quiet. The government's being particularly conservative, and I mean that small c conservative. So that's really where we stand right now. Nothing to report. We're still hoping to see some movement in the next couple of weeks. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, we're expecting gyms in phase 3 in Ontario. We thought we'd get an announcement last week about certain areas, but there was a setback in Kingston with the nail salon that I think set everybody back. Apparently the news conference that just happened from 40 was asked specifically about gyms and inferred like phase 3 would be end of July potentially. So that's what we're looking at in Ontario. I did speak to the GM of that gym who opened the outdoor gym yesterday. And it was very interesting because he had spoken to 2 or 3 different people and he'd been told it was okay to do that, although he didn't speak to public health. So his whole thing, their whole thing was, hey, we thought this was okay. We were told we were getting really mixed information. So we figured we'd do it. It was outside. But because it was shared equipment, which was against regulation, the public health came in and shut them down. So they thought that they were in the okay with it. They figured they would give it a shot and see what happened. It's somebody who I've asked to come to the coalition. So I kind of reiterated that, just to, I don't know if they recognize the repercussions of it for everybody else, but that's bad press for everybody. And that just comes to the one thing in Ontario that we're getting. It's still kind of nebulous. There's people doing different things. The need for some self-policing and just for how we as an industry approach it when we hear other people doing it and how we have that conversation with other people about what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. I think that was part of the Ontario Coalition. On another kind of side note, just that may be helpful from the medical side of things, I did hear some stuff from the medical world the other day about that there's, as much as there's stuff about the gyms being safe and everything, there's still some concern about time of exposure. So there could be stuff coming out around studies of limiting people to 1 hour in the gym, which actually could help in a lot of ways. Because if you have to limit people to 1 hour, it means you can get turnover happening quicker at those bookings and things. So that might be another positive to look at, or something that we could look at, gyms might want to look at doing, is keeping people to 45 minutes to an hour in their bookings so they can turn that over quicker.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
All right, thank you. Any other comments about Ontario? Okay, lots still happening in Ontario. Quebec. Let's move to Quebec.
Happy Friday, everybody. So I would say that the majority of our members opened a week and a half ago now at this point, and the rest of them will be opening, I would say, by the end of next week. Almost everyone will have had some openings here and there. So we're getting some feedback for that. What I keep getting more than anything else now is questions. I think everybody kind of wants to get a standard or a parameter of some kind as it relates to occupancy, capacity, sales, cancellations, and where it's at. So I know it keeps coming up every week in terms of where everybody is at with that. And the new question did, like I said, come from Quebec in terms of projecting finances and sales and what to move forward, because they need to deliver it to their teams to be able to see how we can move forward with that. So anything that we have, I wonder if, Trisha, maybe we're at the point where it might be good doing a survey, especially with the ones that have been open for a little bit longer, saying like a month in, like BC, like being a month in now, where is it with that? And then it's anonymous. So those that would prefer perhaps not to share all of those financial, all that financial data would be a bit more comfortable. That'd be great. Thank you. And then the other piece seems to be more, so here we seem to be moving towards masks in a similar way that Ontario is. Our hope is that we are moving more towards masks, therefore hopefully less towards closures. If and when the second wave does come. So in the entire province, all public transit now, masks are mandatory, or as of Monday, I think, masks are mandatory. And there is a municipality in Montreal that has a higher population of active agers where they've decided to make masks mandatory to everything indoors. And it's the same thing with gyms, same thing as restaurants, because you can't eat with a mask as far as I know. So the weirdness about, so you walk in with it, then you take it off and then you put it on to walk out would be the same thing for restaurants and everything else. Because again, everything's open in Quebec now, including restaurants and bars. And so if we do move towards that, that's the hope, is that it's more masks, less closings as it relates to the economy, and that we can keep surviving through that. And yes, so the questions are being asked, and so maybe I'll have a follow-up conversation with Scott and Trisha about how to move forward with respect to the financial support from, or what FIC asks now from every one of the provinces, whether it's prescription to get active, whether it's the adult fitness tax credit, or all of those things, or like what's the next step in the conversation. If you've got this separate provincial way to go, I think we have a little bit of budget left with I'll thanks Mo for the question. I'll get to that. Thank you. I think we have a little bit of budget left with our provincial lobbying firm here that we can do a little bit of work and then come up with a national strategy. So perhaps there's an opportunity to do that. So Mo's asking in terms of cases. So it's gyms, it was gyms, and then it was restaurants, then gyms, then everything. And so I would say that everything has been open now for, Sam, was it like 10 days now? I think we're at 10 days where everything's been open, and no, we have not seen a resurgence in cases yet. So we're floating around the 55 to 75 new cases a day, floating around the 8 to 20 deaths per day. And that's been the case now for probably almost 2 weeks, with nothing changing much from there. So fingers crossed that will hold, and therefore we're doing that. And we'll be able to hold it that way, but that's where Quebec sits now.
Great, thank you. I don't believe we have Rob here for PEI. If there's anyone else who wants to give us an update on Atlantic provinces at all. All right. Well, I just do want to mention that a survey is a great idea, and that's something that we can definitely do. So I will be sure to get that in the works. And if there's any specific questions that are going to be of interest to anyone, please send them my way so we can make sure that they are included within the survey. The survey that went out about a month ago that was created by the Ontario Coalition, we did get some results back. So I have just posted that the results in the chat box there. So if you're interested in checking that out, please take a look. There were 702 responses. Most of the feedback was pretty positive, indicating how safe that people feel in the club. So that's a little bit of good news there. I do want to backtrack to Alberta because I see Laura has asked a question here. Scott, if you want to take on Laura's question that's in the chat box, for has there been any talk about spacing of equipment for cardio areas? Guidelines suggest to consider 3 meters, but that's not clear. And I think there was another question earlier about Alberta and spacing.
Yeah, there's, so it's all about high intensity exercise. So they've used the example as treadmills. So we have spaced our cardio at 10 meters, or sorry, not 10 meters, 3 meters, 9.8 feet, based on the quote unquote high intensity exercise. And then as far as the pushing for 2 meter versus 3 meter, on last week's call, we mentioned that in our meeting with the Ministry of Economic Development, they committed to reviewing that specific item in about a month's time and just see how we're doing as a province. And we did make the case that the 3 meters is detrimental to small studios. So they did say they would raise that specific issue and look at it, but there's no update.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments that we want to make for today's call?
I have one question, and sorry, I might have missed it from the beginning. In the States, how is it doing? The occupancy rate, the sales? Anyone have some information?
Perhaps Dave, if you wanted to take that comment or that question.
Perhaps Blake could do a better job of that. He's been on a number of CEO calls and also calls with our industry.
Yeah, I can give you guys a little bit of an update. You know, what we're kind of hearing across the board is a lot of studios and fitness facilities that have reopened initially to see a surge of new members. But after a couple of weeks, that surge of new members starts to go away. And they are constantly being whittled away by both terminations and freezes. So we see both with studios and big box clubs that the numbers can continue to deplete over the first 30 days to the point where they're getting to, you know, a lot of the studios and big box are under 60% of their pre-COVID member numbers. So that seems to be, you know, the bottom seems to be different depending on, you know, how bad the COVID situation is in that state. So, for example, you know, Texas and Arizona seem to be bottoming out in some cases as low as 50% of their pre-COVID active members, whereas, you know, you have some places that are as high as 70, especially rural markets seem to be sort of bottoming out around 65, 70%. So, you know, I think they've only, there's lots of places are wondering where the bottom is and how to bottom out. But what the big learning is, and I would encourage you to all take the stance, which is to, when you're reopening, don't just rely on social media or don't just rely on social media or your email that goes out. I would be actually trying to actively engage your membership and get them to come in to either observe or participate in exercise within your facility to make them feel comfortable with all of the different measures that you've taken to keep them safe. That seems to be the practice which the gyms or studios that have been able to maintain the highest level of their pre-COVID membership have done, and they've been very successful at trying to at reaching a number that is economically viable for them going forward. So that's a pretty key learning I think that everybody in Canada can take, and hopefully I am very hopeful that in Canada, given that our control of the spread of this has been much you know, done much better than they have certainly in the southern U.S. Quite hopeful that we're able to show some better numbers. Early indicators for the 20 open Orange Theory fitness studios in Canada that have reopened to date are that our numbers have been slightly better, especially in places like Manitoba and BC, where you know, the new infection rates are quite low. So hopefully, if we can do a good job of maintaining this, and to Dave's point, working with our governments to both show a clean track record and a you know, work with the governments to make sure that there's a good line of communication. They see us as partners, not adversaries. You know, we can continue to see strong growth here in Canada. I would note one thing though, and it was something I was going to bring up earlier in the call. And Scott actually talked to this a couple of weeks, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. We are starting to see in a lot of the open markets, certain players take liberties with the social distancing rules, measures they have in place. You know, we've seen F45s with people, you know, coaches aren't wearing masks. They're taking group photos, you know, where none of the participants have masks and everybody's huddled together and posting those on social media. That is the kind of stuff that is going to get us shut down. And it's going to, I mean, all it's going to take is one of those independent studios or gyms to have some sort of an outbreak. You know, that's the type of thing that will go viral, and it will have a massive impact on all of us. And I agree with Scott. I think as players in this industry where we see that type of stuff, not only do we need to call it out to the operator, but we also need to call it out to the health authorities and you know, incite some sort of citation against them, because we just cannot afford to have that happen up here. And I know, Scott, you want to talk to that at all, but I think that was I'm seeing it more and more in these markets that are open, and I'm really I'm quite fearful of it.
Well, my personal opinion is it's the one strike and you're out. So I will phone the operator and tell them. And then if there's any sort of pushback, I just go to the health authority. And I've done that on a few occasions now. Most people say, thank you very much, I wasn't aware. And they put the correction in place. But those that have pushed back, I don't debate it with them. I just say, okay, fine, and send it to Alberta Health.
Yeah, this is Carl Ulmer out in British Columbia. I actually had some time to reflect on Mo's question from last Friday on whether or not members and even staff are becoming more relaxed in British Columbia. And in my club visits, I will say that that's definitely happening. And so it's really important that we hold the rope on that and hold our own teams accountable. I'll be transparent. I got a picture from a team member a couple of days ago where they're excited that they had reached a milestone, but in the picture they were right beside another team member without a mask on. So that is the relaxing that can start to happen even in our organizations when we're holding our team so accountable. So those reminders over and over and over again have to happen, because even we can become relaxed at times, and that just can't happen. So I think these Friday calls are a great way to hold each other accountable as well. I wanted to bring up a point that was brought up last week. Somebody had mentioned about a case happening in a fitness facility being detrimental to the industry. And I just want to make the point that there is going to be a case that happens, or somebody with COVID that enters into a fitness facility at some point. It's how we respond to that when it happens that's going to definitely define us as an industry, in my opinion. So if you don't have in place procedures and protocols for when that does happen in your fitness facility, you really got to get on top of that, because the response to having a case is really going to define us, because there will be people with COVID in fitness facilities in Canada. So I just wanted to make that point. And if you need support with a process, feel free to reach out to myself, or I'm sure a lot of people on this call have experience or have that in place as well that can help you out.
Yeah, just quickly on that note, as soon as it did happen in West Virginia, there was one person who tested positive, and then the press wrote an article right about it. And they didn't say whether it was positive or negative. They just said someone went into a gym positive, 205 people had to quarantine because of it. But they didn't say whether that 205 people were easily contact traced because the gym had those things in place, whether anyone else did test positive or there was no positive tests. So there wasn't anything that said negative or positive. It could end up being very positive if nobody did test, and if they were able to contact trace, that's a very good example of a gym being safe. So definitely just have to be careful, because they're looking for something to run with, and it will happen.
All right. There was one more question that I just do want to wrap up today with. So Emily in the chat box asked if anyone is clear on whether using plexiglass dividers decreases physical distancing requirements, and does anyone have a great resource to scope and build this, especially in Alberta?
My understanding in Alberta, and anybody else correct me if I'm wrong, but if you do have plexiglass dividers, that does reduce the physical distancing requirement. I do not have a great source to build them, but it would reduce the requirement.
In Quebec,
Scott?
it's either 2 meters or a physical barrier. So it's one or the other is the way that it is here.
And Scott, just a little note on that. It can reduce it, but not for classes. It's 3 meters and plexiglass, or just 3 meters. That's the way the rules are written.
So the higher intensity. Okay.
All right, so that's all great information. Thank you, everyone. Here on the chat box, Scott has mentioned for next week, sharing rapid response plans. So that's a great topic for our open discussions for next week. So please take this week, think about that. If you can come up with something to share, it would be really great to hear from everybody. And as you can see, that this association has really been trying our best to support each other through this situation, through the pandemic. So please make sure that you do feel free to contribute to us if you're not already, but also making sure that you do let others know what we are doing, what we're here for, what changes we're doing, what we're lobbying for in order to build a stronger association. We're more than happy to invite more people to this meeting. So please, please spread the word so we can be stronger together. So
can I add one thing? Hi, everyone. I just want to say today marks 10 years that Trisha's been part of FIC. So I think she deserves an amazing, fantastic bravo for all the amazing hard work she's done.
Congratulations. Wow, absolutely. Thank you, Trisha, for everything. It's unbelievable.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Unique anniversary. It'll be memorable.
It will be memorable. 10 years. Who would have thought?
5?
Yeah, that means you're 10 years older now too. Remember that.
Wow. Way to go, Trisha.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we will see you all again, same time, same place next week.
Thanks.